What's poppin', y'all? Welcome back to another episode of NBA Weekly. I'm your host, Pee Wee the Plug. Welcome back, boys and girls. In today's episode, we got to talk about Kevin Durant possibly joining Jason Tatum in Boston in exchange for Jaylen Brown and other pieces to come. Also, I just want to remind you guys that these limited and exclusive Rich Vision hoodies are dropping very, very soon. So those of y'all that are interested, make sure you're on the lookout so you don't miss that. And lastly, make sure you're following me at Pee Wee the Plug on Twitter so you can be involved in all of the future Q&A videos that I'm doing. Today, I just posted a tweet about a non-basketball related Q&A. So if you have any questions or concerns that have nothing to do with basketball, make sure you go find that tweet, drop your question in the comments, and hopefully I can pick you for that Q&A. Now, for Kevin Durant and the Boston Celtics, Brooklyn Nets, Jaylen Brown, let's unpack all of this. When I woke up this morning, it was reported that the Boston Celtics had offered Jaylen Brown, Derek White, and a first-round pick in exchange for Kevin Durant, and that was quickly counter-offered by the Brooklyn Nets, basically letting the Celtics know that they would have to start with Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, and picks, and also a third potential rotational player for them to have any interest. Now, initially when I saw this, I'm not going to lie, it got me a little bit excited because for the first time during this entire Kevin Durant saga, is what I've been calling it, the trade request situation, the Boston Celtics have been the first team that have felt like a realistic trade partner with the Brooklyn Nets. When I was first seeing, the DeAndre Ayton and the Phoenix Suns situation, I wasn't much of a believer in that because DeAndre Ayton was a restricted free agent, because he would have had to want to go to Brooklyn, and I didn't see any scenario where he would do the Phoenix Suns any favors to trade him and get drastically better. That just made no sense to my mind. Also, like the Chicago Bulls, didn't really see any package that could work there. What other team? The 76ers made no sense. The Miami Heat, I understand why they would want Kevin Durant. I understand why they're always attached to players. But when I saw the packages of them using the same trade package people use for Donovan Mitchell trades, you cannot think that the same package for that will work for Kevin Durant. And also, the situation of the Nets acquiring Ben Simmons and a designated rookie extension he had, which means that they can't bring on other players that have the rookie extension designated, that whatever. That whole rule means that they can't acquire another contract that has a rookie extension. So Bam Adebayo can't be involved in a Miami Heat Kevin Durant swap. Once those scenarios unpacked, it was like, well, damn, who is a suitor for Kevin Durant? And why are we talking about this if there's really none? So today when I got this report, this is the first time I actually felt like, okay, this could be something. Jaylen Brown isn't on that extension, so you don't have to worry about him and Ben Simmons being on the same team. That works. I think there's interest there. And I think that the Boston Celtics have enough to part ways with a little bit more than they want to. And what I mean by that is, if the Brooklyn Nets are asking for a Marcus Smart and a potential Jaylen Brown swap, and of course they want the picks, I think Boston has to seriously consider this situation. You have a chance to add Kevin Durant to a very, very good team, which, yes, the defensive side of the basketball was where they really impressed and blew everybody away. But I think a lot of that comes from having the back line be Robert Williams. That's no slight at all for Marcus Smart, who I praised all year for his defense and who was ultimately the Defensive Player of the Year. But I think if you part ways with Marcus Smart, yeah, there's going to be somewhat of a drop-off, but I still don't think it makes you completely fall off the face of the earth as a solid defensive group. You still would have Jason Tatum. You still would have Robert Williams. You still would have Al Horford, I would assume. And also, when it comes to guard play, you just acquired Malcolm Brogdon, and you possibly would still have Derek White. So we're talking about a situation where you have Derek White, Malcolm Brogdon, Jason Tatum, Kevin Durant, Al Horford, Robert Williams. I'm assuming when they say potentially a third rotational player, that player is Grant Williams. So in my mind, I'm thinking a package of Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, Grant Williams, and however many picks they agree on, and that's the trade. Which, yeah, it cuts into the depth of the Boston Celtics, which they didn't really thrive on or have a bunch of. But you're replacing those loopholes with a guy who's one of the best players we've seen over the last, I don't know how many years. He's one of the best players of this generation, and he's a for sure fire mismatch bucket. You're pairing that with Jason Tatum, and Kevin Durant has shown when he's on a proper defensive teams, he can turn up his defensive notch to a higher level in the situations that require that. So it's a really fascinating situation because I definitely think the Celtics have to consider it. The other part of all of this is how much they're going to have to really consider it now that Jaylen Brown tweeted the SMH thing. So right after all of this came out and all of the tweets from all of these reporters started coming out, Jaylen Brown quickly put out just a SMH tweet, shaking my head. And we all know that it's about the trade rumors. And there's a frustration there for Jaylen Brown because he's dealt with this in his entire stay with the Celtics. Anytime a star or a top player has become available and they've gotten linked to the Celtics, Jaylen Brown has been the headline name that's been rumored / reported to be offered in any package for these guys. From Anthony Davis back when he was becoming available all those years ago, when Brad Stevens and Danny Ainge was there, to Kawhi Leonard. Now we're talking about Kevin Durant. And even outside of those situations, there's always been that conversation of, can the Boston Celtics succeed and have success with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum? If not, you're going to have to trade Jaylen Brown because obviously Jason Tatum is your guy. And I understand the frustration is probably coming from Jaylen Brown. It's like, damn, we just came off a championship run where we really gave a veteran, experienced Golden State Warrior team a run for their money. They really kept up with them. It ain't like the Warriors went into that series and just dominated the Celtics and beat them in a gentleman's sweep or swept them. It was really a battle, and the Warriors had to earn that championship. So it's like, coming off of that, we add pieces like Malcolm Brogdon and Danilo Gallinari, plus the experience we gained from that. Robert Williams is going to be more healthy now. We're not running it back. After all of that, I still got to deal with this. You know what I mean? This is also a guy who didn't get a max extension way back. Remember, his extension was $107 million. He didn't have no rookie max extension, which is why he could be suitable for a trade package with Brooklyn, unlike the Bam Adebayos and all the other names that had been brought up as far as Kevin Durant trades. So he didn't get the extension he wanted, rightfully so. He had an injury. He wasn't as good, or didn't show as much then. His ascendance kind of came after the extension. So I can understand the frustration from Jaylen Brown in that aspect, and you have a lot of people supporting him on Twitter from that perspective of like, damn, I feel for Jaylen Brown. He can barely be comfortable even after a championship run. But the other side of that coin, and what a lot of other people are expressing, is, dog, it's Kevin Durant. It was Anthony Davis. It's Kawhi Leonard. It's a business. When those names become available for a team or organization to get better at that margin, they have to entertain it. They have to at least attempt to get better. That's the name of the game, and anybody can be available for the right price. And that's the part where I'm like, yeah, it's right. You can't be mad that your team is playing the game, which is to try to get better and ultimately put themselves in a position to win the championship. And if we're being honest, if you replace Jaylen Brown with Kevin Durant, Celtics are a lot more worthy or a lot more suitable to beat that Warriors team and win another championship or compete at another championship level. So those things I definitely understand. I'm very, very understanding to both perspectives. So I have my foot on Jaylen Brown's side, but I also have my foot on the Celtics side, where it's like they have to get better. Now, from Brooklyn's standpoint, to be able to get a guy like Jaylen Brown who potentially has more to offer. A lot of people think that we're only seeing partial of Jaylen Brown's game because he is playing with Jason Tatum, and a lot of people think if he had his own team or had his own situation, his wings would maybe spread more and fly and grow with more opportunity. So I like this trade potentially from Brooklyn, where you bring back something that I think every team needs in a rebuild, or if they want to go anywhere in their rebuild, which is a strong defensive wing who can also score the basketball. Yes, Jaylen Brown has improvements to make on both sides of the basketball, but I think he is a prototypical two-way guy that every team is looking for to have a part of their core. So you have that. Marcus Smart, I think, is an experienced guy, and even if it doesn't work out in Brooklyn or they aren't as good as they think they can be right away, he's a guy that would be highly suitable in trade packages for years to come. Every team is going to be looking and wanting to add a Marcus Smart. And then you think about the picks. You know what I mean? The picks are always going to be the difference maker for the Brooklyn Nets because obviously they're going from title hopes to rebuilding or retooling. So again, we know those picks will be important. I think also acquiring Marcus Smart allows you to now move on from Kyrie Irving. Whatever was the holdup for not trading Kyrie Irving to wherever situation you wanted to trade him to, once you get rid of Kevin Durant or part ways with him, that makes that situation a whole lot easier to do. And you're looking at a team that will potentially have, if this trade went down, Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, Ben Simmons. You still have Seth Curry, Joe Harris. Don't know how expendable they become if Kyrie and Kevin Durant get traded, but they would be on the roster. Nicholas Claxton. There's a lot of shooting with Joe Harris and Seth Curry, but when you think about the defensive unit of Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, and Ben Simmons, that could be extremely enticing and interesting. I'm not here to say that team is competing or going anywhere or doing any damage, but on the defensive side of the basketball, that sounds like something that will be fun to watch and fun to see. Jaylen Brown, Ben Simmons, Marcus Smart, alongside the shooting of Seth Curry and Joe Harris to open up the floor for Ben Simmons if he's playing small ball 5 or whatever situation they would go in or direction they would go in. That sounds exciting. Now, my question to all of y'all that's watching this is, if the Celtics did that trade, which would be Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, Grant Williams, and however many picks they agree upon, is the Celtics the overwhelmingly favorite team to win the championship with a lineup of, I'll say, Brogdon. It would have to be Brogdon, Tatum, Durant, Horford, Williams. Is that the over, or is that too big? Do they have to? Is Al Horford coming off the bench now? Is it Derek White? Is it Malcolm Brogdon, Derek White, Tatum, Durant, and Robert Williams? However, is that team your overwhelmingly favorite, or is there still parity in the NBA where you feel like that team isn't just overpoweringly good? They do lack depth. The outside shooting would definitely have to come around because you can't rely on Derek White to shoot how he shot against the Warriors in that one game or whatnot. I do like Malcolm Brogdon there, playing off of Kevin Durant and Jason Tatum with him spacing the floor. You do have Al Horford. That would be extremely interesting. They picked up Danilo Gallinari. There are some things there, but I'm just curious to see how people will react to that as far as them being the overwhelmingly favorite, or do we still think that, man, the Bucks could still beat that team? You know, the Philadelphia 76ers at full strength could still beat that team. The Miami Heat could give that team some problems. The Warriors would still beat that team. How do y'all feel? Let me know in the comments. I will say, the only thing I would say about this trade is the fact that Jaylen Brown, October 1st, becomes eligible for an extension. The extension is weak as hell. It's like 3 years, $111 million. His value is way, way, way beyond that. But for Jaylen Brown to get the money he could command or is going to want, he would have to wait out the full length of his contract and test free agency. Is that type of situation putting pressure on Boston to move him, knowing that the last time they had contract talks and conversation, it probably left a sour taste in Jaylen Brown's mouth? And do they want to even play that game of risking losing him? Same thing and vice versa for Brooklyn. Are they going to ask for more and more and demand a higher trade package or more pieces because of the possibility of Jaylen Brown being gone in a couple years and just test a free agency and going back to Atlanta? If he can get his money from somewhere else and just leave, how does that make Brooklyn feel? And should Brooklyn commit to this? It's a lot that goes on into this. I've seen a lot of things reported about why Boston would potentially want to move on from Jaylen Brown, kind of like the same situation that DeJounte and the Spurs were in, except obviously the Boston Celtics are in a different competitive space than what the San Antonio Spurs were. So that's also an interesting dynamic. I think this is a situation that's interesting. If I had to give it any percentage of happening, I think we have to wait until at least training camp. That's also been something that's been rumored. Teams want to see how serious the Brooklyn Nets are about trading Kyrie and Kevin Durant, or is this something that they're going to take into training camp and then both players are going to report and then they're going to realize that Brooklyn isn't as bad and this was all for Kyrie to get his money and they're actually a very good team and they're just going to compete and just go along with it until they have to make their decisions? Or is this a situation where Kevin Durant is going to hold out, not report to camp, not show up to shit, and really put the pressure on the Brooklyn Nets to trade him? Because if that's the case, then a lot of teams will probably not give up a whole bunch, right? It brings the value down if you know Brooklyn has to trade Kevin Durant versus them wanting to trade Kevin Durant. So that's going to be something to watch for. But again, ultimately, my percentages is probably like 60-40. I get this trade like a 40% chance of happening because I ultimately do think that the Brooklyn Nets are going to come back to training camp. They're going to be around each other and they're going to look around in the locker room and they're going to say to each other, shit, we actually have a decent ass team if we just put the bullshit aside and actually go out and play. We have a team of Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, Ben Simmons, Joe Harris, Seth Curry, Nicholas Claxton. They just signed T.J. Warren, Cam Thomas, Dayron Sharp, Kessler Edwards. They had, not to name those guys and pretend that those guys are just overwhelmingly incredible, the last few names that I added, but I think that those are guys who could be serviceable role players around Kevin Durant, Ben Simmons, and Kyrie Irving, especially with the shooting of Seth Curry and Joe Harris. That unlocks so much if you want to have Ben Simmons out there playing, a point center or anything like that. And his defensive prowess will really open up a lot of things for them to get some stops and get into transition, which would make them as dangerous of a team as there is. And adding TJ Warren, a guy like that to have, for depth was something they were really, really missing. So, we'll see, but I do hope that that's the realization. I hope that the Brooklyn Nets start training camp and they think to themselves, our team is actually pretty good, and if we stop bitching and crying for a second, we can actually compete. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting because if this trade doesn't happen, I also am interested to see the response of Jaylen Brown going forward with the Boston Celtics because he's clearly frustrated. He's clearly frustrated for proper reasons, like I mentioned, but I also understand and support the Celtics trying to get better in any acceptable way because that's the name of the game. Make sure y'all are tuned in. We're going to be having a lot of video updates on this situation, I'm guessing, because, again, it's the saga of Kevin Durant. I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. Until next time, I will see you guys. I'm Pee Wee the Plug. This is NBA Weekly. Appreciate you guys watching. I'm out. Peace.